Welcome to the Creative Mystic, Chapter 4, Overcoming Fears of an Author's Tale. Hi, I'm back. So last time we talked about some of the things that that went into my writing, to the beginnings of it, and working with a developmental editor. Well, the writing process takes it's a journey all of its own because you start out with an idea and you put it on paper or in a computer. And then what? What do you do with it? Sending it to an editor is the first step of being vulnerable. Because what if she hates it? What if she says, "You're no writer, forget it"? Like on Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful says, "Take it behind the barn and shoot it." What if she says that? Our poor little egos, our poor little inner child, they get so easily bruised and they get so easily intimidated and scared that pushing that send button is like it's like the moment of truth or the moment of death, one or the other. So that's the first challenge to overcome, that one fear. And it's a big one because fear of rejection is huge, especially I'm a Leo. I got 6 planets in Leo and 7 planets, including Leo, in the eighth house. So it's like I've got this focused fire energy, and fire does not like to be rejected. We like to be on top of the world. And to have someone to put yourself out there so that someone has the potential to tear you down and make you look like you're no good. That is the first vulnerability to overcome. So luckily, all the editors that I've worked with, they've been firm but gentle. So the first lady that I was working with, she actually was pretty blunt, and she would just call things like they were. She would just say, "That's not how your character should behave, and you need to rethink that." I mean, she would just be direct like that, which sometimes I get done. We had conversations, brainstorming on the book. We'd have conversations, and I'd get off the phone and I'd say, "You don't know anything. This is my book. I'm going to write it the way I want to do it." And then after I cool off, then I'd say, well, maybe she did have a good idea and maybe I could implement it a little bit, try it. So that's the next thing is being willing to process the criticism because you will get it and move on and say, okay, she has my best interest in mind, and I am going to listen to it and adapt it to what works for me. So that's all, so that you go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth a whole bunch of times. And eventually you start getting a rhythm going in the writing. Okay, so now you've got several drafts in, several revisions in, and you think and the other thing about a new author, see, I always think that this draft is the final draft. I had to rename my files so many times because this is the final draft. No, there's a problem. You have to fix that. This character doesn't work. This character is not acting correctly. You need to explain why this is there. You need to take that out. You go back and forth. So you end up having to have a little bit of patience with yourself, with the editor, and with the writing process. But eventually, you do get to where it's like almost finished. And you need to have someone else's eyes on it because as a writer, I don't know about other writers, but at least for myself, everything is all up here in my head. I see the whole thing in um, vivid color, and I see the scenes all playing out. And this person's doing that, and that person's doing this, and they're saying this and this and this, and my fingers can't write fast enough. They can't type fast enough to get it all out. And so there'll be gaps and there'll be missing pieces. And that's where another set of eyes is really important because they help fill in how did she get from here to here? And you look and say, oh, okay, I better fill it in. So another set of eyes is really important. So I got some really good beta readers off of Fivers, and some of them were just they just read it and said, "Oh yeah, this is great." And they gave a little analysis of what they thought of it. But I had one reader who was really helpful, and she would go through in the comments and she'd say, "I really like this section," and then she'd say, "You know, go based on what you've already said, what you've the tone that you've set in the story. What if your character did this? Or what if this is what the next action was? Or what if instead of her doing this action, she did that action and maybe she said this, or maybe there's an extra character here that doesn't need to be here." So she was really good, and I really appreciated her because she did such a good job of going through my book and as an outsider, because the problem with working with the editor is pretty soon they kind of get that same your brain supplies what's not there with what's not written, and they get too close to it to really be able to really pinpoint and say, hey, there's something missing here, or that doesn't fit. It doesn't match with the tone you've already set. So you have a third set of eyes this is brand new to them, and so they can give you some really good feedback. And so I took her feedback and I rewrote the story again. And then I finally thought, well, this is pretty good. Now, part of the writing had to do with uh, scenes like one of the scenes was a death scene of Elara's mate. So now, if you think about this, it's sort of like this is like a parallel life to me, and it was channeled. The final section was actually channeled, the final version, and well, actually, I think it all was to some degree or another. But I didn't realize how much of a parallel life it was until I learned just a few months ago that I was actually channeling an ancestor of mine in writing this story, in the story as it unfolds. So no wonder it made sense. All this he's a Celtic ancestor, a Scottish one, as a matter of fact. And so here's, no wonder I was talking about these Celtic traditions, and which I didn't know about until I studied after I wrote the book. Uh, but getting back on point, um, so I wrote this death scene, and it made perfect sense in the story because the mate had to be gotten out of the way so this next person, so Elara could move into her destiny. He was in a way holding her back because she didn't want to change. So that was kind of an awkward thing because my partner is elderly and I know that he's on his downhill run. And so I was really scared to let him know that I had written about his death. Oh, not in the way that happened in the book. I hope not. But just the fact that, this is a transition that's going to happen. And also with my dog, who's in that same place at the end of his life. So then there was also the intimate scenes. So this is where the first developmental editor really got after me because it's like all your secret fantasies come out when you are writing some intimate scenes. And it's like, this is what I really want my romance to be like, and this is what I really want my lover to be like. And it's like, do I want anybody to know about this? This is my secret. How can I reveal what I really want from somebody? And so I had to deal with that, not only with the developmental editor, but it's like, what about all the people that are going to read this? You know, they're gonna, what are they going to think about me? So as you're writing, you always have this question, what are people going to think about me? Are they going to judge me and are they going to think I'm a horrible person or something? So finally, one day I got the courage up because I wanted to, my partner, I've been taking a lot of time to work on this. And he was good-natured enough to let me spend hours and hours and hours and hours on this. So I started reading it to him because I wanted to see what his take was on it. And so I read him quite a bit of it. I didn't read the whole book, but I read probably half the book. So of course it had the death scene. And he didn't say a word. And I was really surprised. Usually when he's bored, he falls asleep. But he stayed awake and only his only comment was he wished that I could do voices so it'd be easier to determine who was talking. Like, okay, I guess it passed that test. But I was so scared to read it to him because it's like with your partner, I did not want to have him judge me as less than, or heaven forbid, think I was totally nuts and kick me out of his life. That was my big fear. So it really took a lot of courage to actually read him my story because it was such a personal story to me. Now, I don't know, maybe experienced writers don't have this trouble, but for a person just starting out, these are some of the things that you have to deal with. It'll come and stare you in the face. And so eventually, so then along the way came a lady who I'd known from the human design world, and she offered to publish my book. And she said she would take care of everything, including the marketing. And so I was totally delighted. It's like, oh yes, somebody to do the work I don't want to do. Because here it is, I'm a shy hermit. And so we'll talk about that in the next episode, about what's involved in publishing and how that worked out and what I did next. So that's for the next episode. So until next time, I will see you in the next episode.